The Ropesville Resettlement Project, located south of Lubbock, was created by the federal government in 1936 in an effort to aid struggling landless farmers. 100 similar projects were created nationwide. The Ropesville Project was one of the most successful, and the community exists to this day. In this video, some of the original homesteaders and their children will share their experiences of life on an experimental farm.
Well, of course, you have to be a product of depression to really appreciate it, I think.
I guess you just become accustomed to hard times.
I think that we did as well as we could.
The economic collapse of the 1930s created huge employment problems in both urban and rural areas of America. Unemployment reached 25% by 1933. Cotton fell 400% to a nickel a pound. At the time, no one knew why it happened or how to solve it. The New Deal had a mandate to act. In the first 100 days, dozens of experimental programs were created.
The New Deal, it seems to me, was a patchwork of the art of the possible. The Roosevelt administration came in and they were just trying to do something, anything. And so they just started creating programs right and left.
Progressive policy advisors joined the Roosevelt administration, and they developed a program of subsistence farming and planned rural communities as a way to offer relief to unemployed workers and displaced farmers.
The way to help farm people was different from the way to help urban people. For the same amount of money that they were paying on the relief rolls, they could help the farmers in a more permanent way. So someone came up with this idea of these resettling farmers from non-profitable areas to somewhere where they could have decent homes and a way to make a living.
Some agricultural social scientists believe that if given funds, given credit, financial resources made available to them, small-scale farmers could become very efficient, even just on a small scale.
It was something very unusual because it was helping young couples get started.
Daddy was renting, and there was no chance of him ever getting to buy it. And so that was one reason why he wanted to move, was an opportunity. You know, that was a pretty good opportunity that you didn't have.
Ropesville Farms was a project to aid tenant farmers. The government purchased the land, built houses, prepared the land, and lent money for equipment. The Lubbock Chamber of Commerce and local political leaders enthusiastically supported this project.
A resettlement administration community would be a boon to the nearby towns because they provided work for the people who were building them. They had to have roads, they had to have houses, and then they would also create consumers. The people who lived in these resettlement administration communities would have more buying power. They would be going into the towns.
Business leaders in Lubbock thought this was a way of taking at least some of the relief burden off of the city. You can take these people who are on relief and put them on these farms outside of town.
And instead of spending their money at the usurious country store where they never knew what the interest rate was going to be, they could go to a nice urban store and buy their groceries and buy their clothes and enter the American consumer mainstream, as it were.
Over 1,000 tenants applied for the opportunity to participate, but only 33 farms were initially available. After careful review, the fortunate families were called to Lubbock to select their new homestead.
We got a notice to come up to the hotel at Lubbock, and that's when they had their drawing. All of them were there, the 33, that's the first 33. And they had the children with them, most of them did. It didn't take long. Everybody was ready to get it over with. They were anxious, very anxious. Well, they had these numbers in them. I don't remember if it was a hat or box or what. All I know, we just reached in and my husband grew a number. Well, right straight after we had the drawing, we went out there to see what ours was. and it was Unit 8. And we were thrilled about it. It looked like real good land. And there was still cotton on it that hadn't been gathered.
Well, when we drove up to the house, we went through trails. There was no roads. We just had a trail and no trees, just sitting out in the wild open. And of course you could hear coyotes in the daytime, and we thought we was out in the Wild West. I was happy because my parents were happy. You know, the old houses we lived in were like all the houses back then. They were box and stripped, and you could see daylight anywhere you looked through. So we thought we had struck it rich.
It was all built out of this 90 pine, inside and out.
Inside?
Inside and out. And then, of course, the outside was painted, and all the rooms in the house was painted except the living room and hall, and they was left natural. Oh yeah, we had a windmill and an overhead tank, rainwater in the kitchen sink.
Each farm had a fence around it, barbed wire. I think probably a 4-wire fence. Nice shiny wire, every bit of it. It's all shiny, you know. And in the late of the evening, you know, riding the school bus home, the sun shining on that shiny wire. You know, it's impressive to a kid, you know. When over here, it's just pieced together, and it's rusty and all that kind. Plus the fact that all the posts still had bark on them.
Eleanor Roosevelt took a personal interest in the resettlement projects. It was her dream and desire to improve the lives of lower-income farmers. She insisted that the houses be modern and well-constructed.
It was a brand new house. It had 2 bedrooms, running water. We were not used to that. It had a bathroom, no fixtures, but it had a bathroom. And of course the barn that my husband was really wanting. We had a place with grass, and he'd always wanted animals because we always kept cows and chickens. So we were really excited about that new house.
A sense of relief that we would have a place to live by ourselves, you know, because it had been a hard, it's not very good to live with relatives forever.
Farming is expensive. No income is received until the crop is harvested, so farmers need to borrow money to get started. The government provided low-interest loans.
I believe we got a $1,200 loan to buy a cow and mules and a plow and some chickens and pigs. I had to milk 5 cows, and the main thing was the bucket was so heavy that I carried it back to the house. It would pull my arm. It felt like half joint.
We had 4 horses, and that we all hooked to, you know, one plow. And I did the plowing, and my husband did the hoeing, you know, right by me, because then you didn't have weed killer, you had to hoe it by hand.
Most of the time those rows was a half a mile long, and you'd hoe from one end to the and then take a 5-minute break and hoe back to the other end. And then you'd sharpen your hoe and get your water and rest a few minutes, and then take another row through and back.
The hard part was going back after lunch. That was about the hottest part of the day, and we'd lay down in front of the door to the house. That was the cool part of the house. And it was cool breeze come over you, you know, and about 1 o'clock, Daddy got his hat. I knew it was time to go to work.
We'd get up early in the morning. I would pull 500 pounds. He would pull 1,000 pounds, and that made a bale of cotton. The next day we did it all over again, and we harvested all of our cotton like that.
And you either got on your knees and picked it, or you stood up and bent over and picked it and put it in that sack. Back then we had half and half cotton. Was they called it the mortgage lifter. It'd take about 1,500 pounds to make a bale, so we weighed it so we'd know when we had a bale of cotton. We didn't weigh it to get paid. Our payment was our meals and our clothes.
Sometimes the hard work was made harder by the dust storms that rolled in from the west on a regular basis, an event that played havoc with both crops and houses.
The wind would get up, start blowing, and I hope we never see any of those.
And it come right out of the west, and you could see it coming. I mean, it was just a big old black cloud of dirt. Mother put us to bed. Me and my brother put a wet towel over our mouth so we could breathe. And the worst part of it, you couldn't see your hand out that far in front of us. It was black. And it lasted several hours. Those grooves in that, they're out same crossed on the outside, and you could see it coming through. You could feel it coming through because there was no insulation or anything at that time.
I always like to see them big old dust storms rolling back in the north and all the way around. It'd start over here and go over here, and then they'd roll, you know, and I knew there's a coming. I knew I'd get to go to the house.
The government closely monitored the program. A director offered advice about farming techniques. Annual budgets were required. Account books were inspected.
My sense is that tenant farmers didn't engage in a lot of formal bookkeeping. I think it probably varied from person to person, but I think that most rural families probably didn't have any idea what they were going to make until they took the cotton to the gin.
As you know, farmers are very independent people, and they didn't want to be told what to do. Well, that was our biggest complaint out there. None of us liked to keep those record books, because we were not used to keeping records of things. But we all finally learned how to do it, and we turned them in once a year, and how much money we made and how much we spent. We all had cows and chickens and pigs, and we canned, and in fact we bought very little, just main staples like flour, sugar, and things like that.
They had to write down all their expenditures every day or every month, and all the income, and it really just told about how good a business person they were. That's what it was all about.
One of the goals of the program was to encourage self-sufficiency. The women received advice from home economists who taught canning, weaving, and family finances.
Well, the home demonstration agent was from Levelland, and yes, she came, gave us sewing lessons, canning lessons, and once a month. She came once a month. So
home demonstrator or whatever she was, she'd come by and check how many cans of fruit and whatever you had, and if you didn't have enough, well, she'd say, Ms. Condry, you need to get more beans or peas or whatever.
She was here 20 years. She taught us canning, sewing. We even learned to do advanced sewing, and family life education, and everything that a home person, a family would need.
We canned sausage. I can still taste that good old sausage. We'd make sausage balls and cook them and pressure them, and we'd put them in a quart jar, and then we poured so much grease over them, and that kept them, and they were good.
The New Deal resettlement projects were a success because a sense of community was deliberately created. A community building, commonly owned, was constructed in 1938, and it became the center of community and social life.
A very nice building that had a big area for entertaining. It had a stage. The kitchen was completely equipped, and there was office space for the manager. He wanted to stay there and see after. So we had meetings over there.
We had a committee of farmers that took care of stuff, and then we also had a group of council that women were on it too.
And the men congregated over there a lot and drank coffee with the manager, getting acquainted.
We were just like one big family down here, really. We had our parties all together over there, and the community building was a great place for us to go.
I never quilted a stitch in my life, but I went to quiltings all the time. And it was just a party, and the ones that did the quilting, the rest of us waited on them, and did things for them. And it just had a good time, but that's the way you really got acquainted with people.
We had domino parties, played 42 and dominoes. It really wasn't a dull life.
And then everybody was young and everybody began having babies, and we had lots of showers. And whether you knew them or not, you took a gift and went to that shower because you wanted to get acquainted with people. And that was a tight community, and we saw after each other. Some of the outside world, which we called them, was a little jealous of our closeness because we did see after each other so well. But we all had this thing in common that we just felt like family.
The project on the windswept plains of West Texas was a source of curiosity and interest. Visitors were a common occurrence.
When everybody got moved in, it was really exciting to the surrounding country because it was in the paper and all about, and it was just something no one had ever heard of before. So it was, what we used to say, it was bumper to bumper traffic. Of course, it was not that much, but it was a lot of people just rode around. Some of them would stop and talk to us, but mostly they just rode around and looked at us. And some of the people said they felt like they were in a zoo.
One of the more famous visitors was Eleanor Roosevelt, who took a special interest in the progress of the resettlement communities.
We always called them the big wigs from Washington would come out, and we always had to fix lunch for them. And we really got a bang out of it because they ate so much different to what we did, because they were city folks and we were country folks. And we always fed them black-eyed peas. And most of them didn't have any idea what black-eyed peas were, and told us it was cow feed, but we still fed it to them. And they always enjoyed their meals, and we always enjoyed having them. And we had such a grand place to do it, in this community building with all the dishes, and we had a refrigerator, stove, everything was furnished. All we had to do was take food in. So we enjoyed doing it for those people from Washington.
Ropesville farms thrived, but federal support ended in 1945 when the Farm Security Agency was disbanded.
The New Deal years could be seen as the experimental period where they're seeing what works, what doesn't work. They could have expanded them to the several hundreds into the thousands. They didn't because of the congressional resistance. That's why there weren't more communities than there were. Congressional support for it was not there because of the cost concerns, but especially the ideological concerns, the idea of the government getting involved in this business. It was new, and there were some that embraced it and large numbers that were resistant.
This idea of collectivization and communism, it just wasn't American to be giving land to people who needed land. And so the Resettlement Administration was mired in difficulty from the very beginning. But it was a wonderful, noble idea. It didn't have the funding that it needed to reach very many people. I mean, we're talking millions of landless farmers, and the Resettlement Administration was able to reach only a handful of them. But like so many other things, I think that for a substantial minority, it probably made a real difference.
The Ropesville project was an outstanding success. There were no defaults on any of the government loans. Some of the farmers still plant the land to this day. The participants remember and appreciate the government help and support during a difficult time.
We paid off our farm, and that was one thing my husband wanted to do. He just thought if he could own a farm, because his father never got one paid for, and no one in his family ever paid for a farm. So he wanted to pay for a farm, and that's what we strive to do.
I think it turned out to be real good.
And I think it's one of the greatest things that ever happened during that time.
It was just a marvelous thing for the government to do, and I will always be grateful for the chance that we had. And I wish they'd start it again because the young couples need it again.